They were all consenting.
That's... Really?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a bonus episode about DTF St. Louis, Season 1 on HBO. I'm David Chen here with Patrick Klepek. And in this episode, we are going to discuss the Season 1 finale of DTF St. Louis. We're going to talk about what we thought about the show overall. Yeah, Patrick, let's get right into it. I mean, we had originally started covering this week to week, and then we kind of stopped because I think we both thought that a week-to-week coverage was not going to be compelling enough to make it worth like a full-blown segment. And in my opinion, I actually do think we made the correct decision on that. Like, I think the show is many things, and one of those things is fairly slowly paced, in my opinion. And it just ended up not being a show that I think rewarded a ton of speculation and dissection. All that being said, I know you were pretty mixed on the show from the beginning. I was more positive on it than you. We've now reached the end of season 1. We know the secret. We know the solution to the problem. What did you end up thinking of the show?
I was mixed on it in the beginning because I didn't really know what show I was watching.
Yeah, same. I don't even know if we knew until the end what show we were watching.
Even by the end, I would greatly struggle to. There's many things happening in the show, but to articulate in a succinct way, maybe when I pass off to you, maybe you'll be more successful than I, explaining what was DTF St. Louis about. I was not necessarily a massive fan of the sort of mystery box structure of the show. I thought at first we have a couple different characters who we're not really sure where they lie on the protagonist-antagonist sort of spectrum, but they're our main characters. We're going to sort of POV or centralize one of them, and it's going to help explain or debunk maybe an assumption you made about how you think this story played out.
Right.
And I think that loses some momentum as the show drags through 7 episodes. I think generally speaking, it's too long. But I will say, like, the finale of this show really did make the whole journey worth it.
Nice.
It makes it a hard recommend because I don't know it's hard to recommend without getting into what I felt
without being able to tell
end.
people what it is, right? Yeah.
Because what it is ends up being, I think, frankly, very beautiful and brutally honest and such a deep and interesting exploration of, like, not just male loneliness, but just loneliness and like what we're all looking for in this world, especially in the complicated point of like middle age. I think it's like a story about middle age loneliness and how one's desires and expectations change as one gets older and sort of falls into the rhythms of daily life with like family and friends. And I think it ends up somewhere pretty profound by the end of it, but the journey to get there, I think, is overly long, and it makes it difficult to recommend to people other than just on blind faith. But it's got to be 7 episodes of blind faith. Not that you won't be entertained and surprised and see some genuinely provocative performances along the way, but it is a bit of like, by the end, I promise it'll be worth the 7 hours. But this isn't like this would have been, I think, a quintessential. Had every episode been 30 minutes instead of an hour, I think the show would have like greatly benefited and would have made it sort of an easier recommendation to others for what is a sensibilities in terms of like humor and tone that is just kind of all over the map, episode to episode, moment to moment. But I got to admit, as wishy-washy as I was at the start, mostly there because of the pedigree of the actors, I was fully taken by some of the final moments of this show, very moved, and thought it had quite a bit to say about the characters and the world it was exploring. So I found it very worthwhile by the end. The journey getting there was a bit longer than I wanted it to be, but I can't help but be thankful that I watched the show by the end. How about you?
I feel the same, Patrick Klepek. I spent a lot of my time watching the show fairly annoyed. And the reason why I was annoyed was because basically it's possible to make anyone look like they were the killer. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like in any given story, you can make anyone look like if you just cut from their furtive, you cut to their furtive glances and close. Like if you just reveal selective information, you can make anyone look like the killer. And that felt very cheap, and it felt like what the show spent a lot of its time doing is like, what if Linda Cardellini's the killer? What if she's, looks kind of guilty with all this insurance stuff, huh? Ooh, what if Clark Forrest is actually maybe it's this other guy, right? Like maybe it's Sarsgaard, like, and obviously we now know that none of those people were the killer, right? So it's like, why did we spend all that time pretending they were the killer? Like, there's two things about this show that I'm still debating whether they helped the show or hurt the show. One of them is the murder mystery conceit, right? Of, hey, some guy got killed, murdered. We need to figure out who did it, right? And like, we have these two detectives that are putting everything together, and it's like, was that necessary? Like, was it necessary to kind of structure this as a series of red herrings? Like, did that help the storytelling or hurt the storytelling? Maybe it was the way through which we could find out more about these characters, but at the end, it felt kind of cheap to me. All the murder mystery stuff.
Because there's a different world where we follow this much more linearly, right? Like we don't know.
Well, that was the second point. That was the second point I was going to make, which is like, was leaning on the nonlinear storytelling a crutch, or did the nonlinear storytelling have something to say? And we discussed this in one of our earlier recaps of, okay, the fact that it's telling the story non-linearly, and then it's like, oh hey, but guess what? If you look at two characters on one day, they might look like they hate each other, but then look at them on Tuesday and they look like they're the best of friends. Wow, isn't that like profound? And yeah, it kind of is profound, but I don't know that that's enough to justify doing that for the whole series. Maybe it is. I don't know. So I'm undecided on those two components. Like, were they really beneficial to, were they really meaningful and trying to say something profound? I'm still weighing that. Putting all that aside, I do think the finale is going to be one of those things that like stays with me. You know what I mean? Like, It is a mournful, heartbreaking, gut-wrenching finale with some really searing imagery that is like, I think this is going to stay with me. I think we're going to look back on this years from now, and we'll remember how we felt watching this finale, I think, right? And so for me, ultimately, that makes the whole journey worth it, for sure. Was I frustrated with the storytelling? Yes. Did I think it was too long? Yes. But, did we really need to think Linda Cardellini was the killer for this? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
we spent the whole majority of the show.
We spent the whole episode dedicated to Linda Cardellini is the killer, maybe. Was that necessary? Like, did that add to our understanding of the central issues of the show? Maybe, but I doubt it. Like, I don't think so, right? And so, and you only had 7 episodes too. So like, could we not have dedicated that time to something else, right? Like, I don't know. People will have to decide. So all that said, let's talk about what actually happened in the finale of the show, right? So I have to say, TV Insider has done some great coverage of this. They did an interview with Stephen Conrad, who created the show. And so I'm going to read some excerpts from that probably as we move along. But they also summarized the show, and so I'm just going to read from their summary rather than try to write my own. TV Insider writes, it was a heartbreaking case of suicide. After a series of rejections, not only from Carol, but also from Tiger, played by Chris Perfetti, and even Clark, Jason Bateman, attempted to share a special moment with Floyd, thinking that if they could be intimate, it might bring some spark back to his life. But the kind of moment he was hoping to provide his friend just wasn't there. And while they hugged and danced and shared joy in the pool house, it was Richard seeing them through the window that pushed Floyd over his tipping point. Having put the medication that would drive him towards his death in the Bloody Mary can, he held up the hand signal for I love you before chugging the rest of the can, leading to his own death, end quote. So that is what happened. There was no killer. He did it himself. And yeah, the idea is that he had this series of rejections, that his wife rejected him, and then this random stranger that Clark Forrest met at a diner rejected him, and then in a way Clark kind of rejected him at the end, but not really. Like he was trying to do the right thing, and then his son rejects him, and then I think Floyd realizes that he's lost everything and decides at that point to end it. Now, what I think the show did a really good job is depicting this a very, let's just say, unconventional form of male friendship, right? Like, and that's interesting. Like, we don't get depictions like this very often, where these two share a really close bond, and also they're cool with sharing Floyd's wife sexually, which is also atypical, and out of the box. But yeah, I guess before we even talk about like the finale, and the kind of the ultimate reveal, did you have any thoughts on the Floyd Clark relationship, which I think is the kind of the core of the show?
I mean, like one of, I think the like really broad themes of the show is that we should all be a little more honest with one another, and we'd be happier for it. And I think obviously that speaks really profoundly to their relationship, because
is that though? I don't know if I agree that that's one of the things, because I guess Clark, I think, is very open. You're saying he should have been open with his own wife. Right?
I think this. I mean, between there's the lines stick with me. Through like even once the show fades to memory is the ending that the line we get for the episode title at the end. Nobody's normal. It just looks that way.
Right from across the
street. I think Peter Sarsgaard gives like an incredible performance.
Yes.
Like for a small amount of minutes in this show.
Yeah.
To, like really land, and that line I think is very powerful, because I think like what spokes out of that is a lot of what the show is scratching at, which is, there's also a lot of talk in here of different kinks or sexual preferences that nobody talks about. And like, it's the image that we put on in front of ourselves. And if we just were a little more honest with one another about like what we truly did want, maybe there'd be ways that we could connect and like satisfy one another, whether that is sexually or like between friends or between partners. Like a lot of what happens in this show is like people. Now it uses this weird trio, like sexual trio, to sort of explore what happens when you start breaking down and like being as honest as one could be about what one wants from another person. And it takes it to an extreme, but I do think that is something the show is getting at, is that we are all very performative, and there's reasons for that performance and that public dance, but that it can end up masking a lot of like real pain and suffering and shame that we may not know what to do with. But if we just showed that to other people a little more often, what ends up between, Clark and Floyd by the end is obviously tragic because of how Floyd takes his life. But like the friendship that they share, however unorthodox, involving like, Carol Love, is really like beautiful and aspirational in many ways. Like, what if you could truly find someone that you could share everything with? Like, no, you don't even do that with your partner. Like, we all are guarded and hold secrets that are not, in different ways. And like part of what they explore is they find a new barrier and then they break it down and just keep going. And that has its own consequences. There's like reasons you don't share things with everybody for reasons that are complicated and to be respected. But I felt like those two explored as like brazenly as possible what happens when you are just truly honest with somebody, and doing that in the context of two men, when men usually have trouble speaking honestly with one another, I thought was really powerful.
I think I agree with you about how aspirational this friendship seems. Like, you're right, they do share everything with each other. I wish that the story had a little bit of a happier ending, because the way it ends is so bleak. It almost makes their friendship seem like a cautionary tale. You know what I mean? Like, Floyd ends up dead and Clark loses everything, right? And it's like, maybe if they had never met, that wouldn't have happened. But when we're in the friendship, when we're like witnessing it taking place, it's like, oh, this is lovely. This is beautiful. And so then I'm left kind of in a strange place, given how terribly everything ends for both of them. Is like, but then in the end, it wasn't good for them, right? So like, is that what the show is trying to say? But then you can't deny what you said, Patrick, of like,
I don't know, like if none of this had happened, like, do we imagine that like Carol and Floyd and like their son is in like a better place than where like,
well,
I don't know, like,
yeah, go ahead.
The alternatives all sound also bleak and sad. Like, if they don't go on this journey, like, it's obviously tragic that Floyd dies at the end, but like his son goes through like a transformative emotional journey as a result of like what occurs in the wake and the consequence of like this relationship that forms between. Now whether it ends up like a net positive like over the course of his life, I can't say. Obviously, like carrying the weight of having been an accidental contributor to like this father figure, taking their life is obviously going to be a huge burden. But I don't know, like it's I don't think it's as simple as I didn't look at the end of it as a mistake as much as it got very complicated, and they, the consequence, like everything has its own consequences, and these are the consequences of the actions they all took. But thematically, I thought it was still really, there was a lot to take away from it.
I gotta say, I actually think the son part was really underserved in the finale. Like, it treats the son as a plot device as opposed to an actual character. Like, we need some what happens? Did they even tell the son that was what actually went down there? Like, we never find out how he deals with it, and that was extremely disappointing. So it turns out Steve Conrad has answered this question, Patrick. This TV Insider interview. The question was asked basically like, what would have happened if Floyd had never got on to DTF St. Louis? Right, that was the question asked. Now, that is kind of a proxy for what if he and Clark had never met, because he meets Clark, then they get on DTF St. Louis. And here's what Stephen Conrad says, which I think is pretty freaking bleak. Okay, he says, I think I know what Floyd's fate might have been. I think Carol and Floyd would have divorced. His tax debt was just a burden that he couldn't even help chip away at. Intimacy was gone. They tried, but it had been a year. That failure of their intimate life that we see in episode 6, which would have happened in their bedroom, it was over. So he's saying, like, when she rejects him, that would have just happened with the two of them. And I think they would have been divorced. I think Floyd might have had a relationship with Richard where he wrote him a letter every few months, maybe sent him a Christmas present, but every year that became less and less. And I think Floyd was bound for a really sad life, like many people who have an inherent sweetness, but are also challenged to recognize that they've got to plant their feet and fight sometimes too. Floyd doesn't have any fight in him. He only has kindness. And some people are constitutionally like that. They're wonderful to have with you because they remind you that sweetness is also a quality of life. But if you're married to one and you're trying to fend off the worst possible thing together, that can be a very challenging partner, end quote. Wow, that is such a kind of bleak outlook on human nature, I think. I don't think it's wrong. I just think it's like, man, that is bleak. You're not like leaving there feeling good about stuff, and in a way, I think it kind of reaffirms what I was saying, right? Which is that, like, Floyd is he's so pure, he's so nice and kind, but he doesn't have, according to the maker of the show, textually and metatextually, he doesn't have what it takes to survive in this world.
And also, what does he want? Like that, none of that is actually, I don't think that's sort of solved. And I think part of what the creator is getting at here is Floyd is deferential to an extreme fault to everyone around him. Does it come from a good place? Yes. Like like this is, he makes out with somebody to like not hurt their feelings. Like,
right.
He dances for his best friend for something that they're both sort of exploring. Like, he is so deferential, and that is admirable, but it also means at the end of it, what do you have? Like, for you, like, you're doing a lot for other people, but what do you have for you? And I don't know that Floyd arrives. I think that's part of, why he ends up taking his life at the end, is this realization that not only has everyone around him has sort of rejected him in a certain way, whether, affirmatively or just sort of like by extension. And then what is he left with? Well, there's not much there. Like, he's doing it all for other people. He has nothing to fall back on at his core self.
Yeah, I think that's completely accurate. And the idea is that, like, you need to be able to fight for, like, the show's thesis is you need to be able to fight for yourself to survive in this world, I think is what the show is trying to say. And that people like Floyd are just, they're a hot house flower, right? They're not meant for this world. And that's a very, I would say, cynical view of the human race. Not inaccurate. It's just like, but it's pretty bleak and sad. So anyway, let's talk a little bit about some of the final moments of the show, right? And so we learn what happened. Basically, Clark had wanted to set Floyd up with some guy. It didn't work out, but Clark said, "Hey, maybe you can show up anyway, and I'll have a little surprise for you." And the surprise was Clark himself, and he was going to be like, "Maybe if you dance around a little bit, and I can get excited, maybe Floyd, you'll feel better about that." But then when he's doing it, Clark isn't able to get excited. He just breaks down and has and kind of cries out and realizes like he doesn't know what he's doing. He's completely messing up his own life. And I really thought that was a chilling, beautiful moment. I love how Floyd responds to that moment with like so much compassion. Do you know what I mean? Like he's not even like worried about how hurt he is or how disappointed he is in that moment. He just is like, I need to take care of my friend who's really sad. And that was like a really lovely moment. And David Harbour, I think, did a wonderful job there. But yeah, I mean, too bad for that guy because he doesn't have what it takes to succeed in this world.
I think they both. I think Jason Bateman and David Harbour both do wonderful work like in this show. It's strange material, right? Like, and they're portraying relationships that aren't really depicted on screen like this. Yeah. And there's such a confused earnestness to both of their performances in which like they're treading in waters that neither of them understands, and so there's like this trepidation and excitement, and I found both of their performance to be very endearing and interesting, very out of character or out of type for like the both of them, especially if you aren't Jason Bateman known for comedy, then known for drama with like Ozark. Like just I feel like both of them go to very different places based on what you've come to expect from them as actors across this. And it almost makes sort of wherever you fall on the mystery of it all and whether that worked. Just watching them act was itself like truly a pleasure, just because it was just so interesting. Each of the way they chose to express these characters, like so much of it made me wonder. I'd love to look at the script sometimes, like how much of what's there is on the page versus the choices that these two are making in the performance itself, because they're just so specific, but also just I don't know, so intangible. They're very strange and ethereal.
Yeah, I mean, Jason Bateman whispers a lot of his lines. He's almost like barely even saying a lot of his lines. It's a pretty interesting performance. I agree. So then he's confronted with Richard and. Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit about this already. I wasn't super satisfied with how this all played out. Do I believe that Floyd wouldn't have even attempted to explain to Richard what was happening? Like I don't know. But it is hard. Do I believe that Floyd would be willing to traumatize Richard in that way? Maybe he's not even thinking about that. Like, given what happens to Floyd, I don't know.
I mean, it's the nature of the act that it's like there was no time to think about it, because once they made the choice to ingest the drink, there was no going back. It's the tragedy of what befalls him in this situation is that he gets emotionally gut punched and has the equivalent of a loaded gun. Like you know what I mean? There's no well, I took too many pills, like someone could find me and I could like. That was it. He made the choice, and even in the midst of making it, if he had any sense of, I shouldn't have done this, there was no going back. And like that's for that moment to all occur at once with what he had, which ultimately turned out to be essentially the equivalent of a loaded gun that had like the show was dancing around for a number of episodes, was, just really, really sad.
According to Steve Conrad in this interview with TV Insider, he talks about that specific moment. He says Floyd is confronted with this idea that Richard has seen more than any kid should see, and chooses in that moment to say, I can't fix what I just broke. I can now only just turn the lights out on this act of my life, end quote. It's the combination of like traumatizing Richard in that way, and he already traumatized Richard earlier. The idea is that we find out about how he got the Peyronie's. That part was genuinely funny, that they had this huge setup for how he got this injury, and then you find out it's actually because Richard hit him with a tennis racket because
Baseball
Floyd
bat,
upset
I think.
Oh, okay, yeah, baseball bat. Anyway, yeah, I thought tennis racket, but anyway, yeah, some implement. And that night that they had that big fight, and so the idea is that like he's already angered Richard in this way and hurt Richard in this way, and now he's hurt Richard again, and combined with all the other rejections he's experienced, that's too much for him. You know?
Well, and this is where, for a show that was 7 1-hour-long episodes, to have so much of the final moments fall on the son, who really is barely a character in the show. Right. It's mostly a way for Floyd to, like, it's mostly that character exists as an extension of like Floyd working through shit, as opposed to their own character that has agency and actions within the story. So for so much of the final moments to fall on this idea, like, we never set up in the past, like, is he going out at night and, you know, like, exploring? Like, sure, kids do that. Like, it's not like I can't buy individual moments, but I feel like the show does very little setting up a lot of the things that have to happen in the finale for it all to play out how it did. And if we were going to do that, I wish this had been 8 episodes and we got a POV episode for the son. Like, make this a character. Like, all of a sudden, like, we know that he is struggling. Like, it's never really articulated. Is this like a kid on the spectrum? Like, what exactly is the sort of the struggles that the family and the son are going through? And then all of a sudden in the final episode, like, he can be triggered to the degree that, like, he's going to, like, break a window and then has to be hospitalized and, like, given medication. It's a lot that feels almost like you get there because it had to have the mystery box sort of bit. Like, there's just too many keys that got to fit in the right place. And I wish that character ultimately had been given more of a spotlight if we were going to make them so central to how the plot part wraps up.
100% agreed with you. So Clark ends up explaining a lot of this to police. The idea is that after they say he's no longer a suspect, he then feels comfortable revealing more of what happened. And this helps them to kind of put the final pieces into place. He returns home. On the way home, he sees his billboard has been defaced, and he can go home. Everything's okay, but his family is completely gone. And where he once was swinging back and forth to take a look at his neighbor's yard and to see a man and maybe even a woman and maybe even a man there, although I don't think we ever see either of those characters, if I'm not mistaken. Really.
We see there when he does what did he call him, a safety safety sesh, where he is swinging back and forth, and there's a woman doing like yoga in the backyard, but we never see her face. Like, she's never
right. That's right. But then in when he's talking with Floyd, he makes mention of the husband, a man, and then we never see him at all.
No,
but the idea is just that he's kind of like exploring his sexuality, right? And I think that's relevant. By the way, it is a baseball bat. Sorry, Patrick, and it makes sense it's a baseball bat because he's an umpire. So I don't know why I got tennis racket in my head. Apologies for that. Anyway, so. The episode ends with him not doing a safety session anymore. He's just sitting on the swing. It shows that he stopped looking outside of his house for happiness. But yeah, I mean, this is a very chilling ending, Patrick, because the idea is that he wasn't fulfilled in his marriage. He wanted to explore outside the bounds of it. And as a result, his best friend ended up dead, and his wife and family ended up completely leaving him, right? And this is what happens when you aren't honest about the ways in which you are unsatisfied and try to seek fulfillment outside of the marriage. Is you lose everything. You lose everything, I think, is kind of the moral order of the show. Any thoughts on how DTF St. Louis ultimately ends?
Yeah, and also just it's not something the show will ever explore. You know, I don't think we're gonna ever see these characters on screen again, but the departure of Floyd, I mean, he was a load-bearing part of many people's lives. Even if those at that point it was complicated or people wanted a different version of the relationship, I have to imagine in the wake of his death, like, what is lost as a result is huge. Like, he was just such an instrumental part of, I mean, if you want to look at a little bit of beauty in the finale, it's that, sure, like Carol and her actions, like over the course of the season, there's plenty of ways you can paint people in a negative light, but like the son does appear to like the new school. Like he found a connection with his father that allowed him to better appreciate a little bit about himself. And there is this chance that he's going to go to that new school, like find friends, like find a way to fit in. And, would that have happened? Like, had all these other machinations like not taken place? Like, I don't know. Like, would Floyd and his son have gotten to that place of honesty, which then, creates that checklist that like ironically ends up being part of the reason that like all this falls apart? One of the things that allowed those two to connect and allowed those two to try and give his son a path forward. So I ultimately I thought it was a beautifully dark show. And despite my ambivalence at the start, I am glad I got to the end and would encourage others to do so, even if it requires a little patience along the way.
Yeah. Haunting, chilling stuff at the end. And yeah, it will stay with me.
Yeah.
I think it will stay with me. It's a nice cautionary tale, and I think very, very, very apt. So Stephen Conrad has been giving interviews to various people, including Variety.com. I thought this is interesting, by the way, Variety, because I was wondering, hey, do you think Carol got the insurance money? Probably not, because the police concluded that he killed himself. And he says she would not have, because she helps the detectives draw the conclusion that Floyd killed himself, in which case his life insurance would be worthless. She understands at the moment, the detectives understand Floyd decided to take his own life. The important thing for her then is just the truth, and imparting to Richard that someday he's going to understand what Floyd did, and that he remembers the last communication Floyd ever made to him was to say, "I love you." I think she would rather Richard know this than to have the reward of the insurance, end quote. Did that fully come across? I don't know, but fair enough. So yeah, at the end of the day, a unique show, a compelling show, and one that I'm glad that we watched and got to discuss together. A show that nonetheless, I think you and I both found kind of frustrating in the lead up to the finale, but still worth the journey. Hey everyone, David Chen here. Thank you so much for watching that video from Decoding TV. If you want to get an audio version of the show, all you got to do is go to podcast.decodingtv.com. And if you want to support what we do, get ad-free episodes of the podcast and also bonus episodes of the podcast, go to decodingtv.com and become a paid member. Of course, you can also like and subscribe for more. We appreciate it. Thanks. See you later.